So you ever have one of those days where nothing goes right? I had one of those days. It was a great big disappointment. The clutch on my truck went out, and luck would have it that the right rear hub on the Land Rover went out as well. Huge bummer. No big deal though. Just borrowed a car. Thought I had it figured out, right? I was gonna get the kids on the bus, take my girl to work, and then I was gonna head off to the Etowah, and we were gonna tap some birch trees, and I had a whole script written out of things we were gonna cover. It just didn't work out that way. So I'm grounded. The reason that I'm grounded, Cameron woke up and he's got, strep throat. So Mama's got to take him to the doctor, and she needs the car. So I got stuck at home. Wasn't able to do the things that I wanted to do, but that's okay. We're going to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and that's what it's about. We're going to prevail. So let's go along and see what we can figure out here in the wilderness by the house. Well, it's definitely not the Etowah, but it's gonna do. It'll do just fine. Let's do it. So it's really important when you're out, to be resourceful. You got to have that possum mentality. It's really important because a lot of times you'll walk right past resources, and then when the time comes that you need them, you won't have them. So it's really important to be able to identify the things that are around you so that if you need it in the future, you know exactly where it's at. It's like walking through a store and figuring out what's on the aisles. Now we came out here to look for some birch and to look for some maple to tap. You only get like 2 or 3 weeks during the year where you can make that happen. I really felt like that was important, and that's why we came out. But while I was out here, I noticed this huge beech tree that's behind me. You can see it's a rather large tree. But one thing about beech is that it's really susceptible to disease. You got to be really careful when you're camping around beech. It's a dangerous tree to be around, and when it's a really wet, rainy season, like it has been this year for us, you got to be careful because it will fall over. But in this particular case, it will provide us with something. You'll notice on the ground, I'm going to show you right here, there's all these limbs that have fallen off of the beech tree. Now, typically I tell students, you don't want the firewood that's on the ground. You want the stuff that's up in the air. What's good for us, though, is this particular limb that has fallen off. A lot of it is still up in the air. And if we wanted to start a fire, beech makes excellent coals. Great for cooking. It's really chilly out here. It's about 27 to 28 degrees Fahrenheit right now. And I'm plenty warm going on the trail right now. I've got on my wool. I'm good. But if we needed to come back and start a fire, this would be an excellent spot to do that. We have plenty of firewood that is nice, dry, and seasoned, and a lot of it is not touching the ground. It's actually suspended in the air. So that would make an excellent resource for us. So that's a good score for us. And just to prove my point, I'm going to show you, this is the inside of that tree we were just looking at. Check this out. That thing is rotten all the way through. So, you definitely want to be careful. Even if a tree looks like it's a good tree, you need to walk all the way around that tree and check it out because you never know. I mean, just check out the inside of this one. It's terrible. Got to be careful, guys. So I figured, since we were talking about beech trees, I'd go ahead and just help you learn how to identify that resource. It's winter months right now. But what I'm going to show you is a close-up of the bark. It's a really, really easy tree to identify just based on the bark. Look how smooth it is. It's a real easy tree to learn how to identify once you know the identifiers. Now, another characteristic of beech is that even though it's a hardwood, it tends to keep its leaves on in the wintertime. It's really easy to identify. I thought I'd go ahead and give you a close-up of those as well. Now, these leaves are really pretty in the wintertime. When the wind is blowing, it just looks beautiful in the sunlight, glistening in the sunlight. So that's another way that you can identify beech. So it never ceases to amaze me. It doesn't matter how far off you get in the woods, there's always trash or evidence that humans have been around. Check this out. I found this little bridge, if you will, across the creek. I figured I'd go ahead and just film it just in case I fall. That way you'd get a good laugh. All right, here we go. No fall. So I've been going for a few hours now, about 3 hours. It's important to get a rest in every now and then. I'm getting a little warm now. It's time to shed a layer. So I'm going to go ahead and take one of my layers off. It's really important that, you know, when you're out here, especially when it's cold, especially below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, that you watch out for hypothermic conditions. That's really important, guys. I can't really stress that enough. It can happen faster than you know it, and it happens to the best of us. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shed a layer. I'm going to hydrate up a little bit, and then I'm going to grab some snacks. Yeah, time to eat, son. One of the things that I got to thinking about today, you know, everything wasn't going the way that it was supposed to go, and it would have been real easy to just get upset about it and let it ruin the day. Could have stayed at home watching YouTube or Facebooking and getting lost in TV, you know, just being a couch potato. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get out. I really needed kind of a mental health day. I've been working all week. I've got classes coming up this weekend that I've got to teach over at the survival school. And I just really needed like a mental health day to get out and enjoy myself, recenter myself, if you will. And I always seem to be able to do that in the woods. And it would have been real easy for me to just get upset about it. But you know what? As humans, we tend to always want what we don't have. And we tend to forget about the things that are right in front of us. And so today I decided, you know, I'm just not going to let that happen. You need to practice what you preach. One of the things that I used to do when I was a kid, my grandfather, he would take me down to the tree farm. And the last stop before you got to the farm was this Piggly Wiggly. And it was about an hour drive from the Piggly Wiggly to the actual camp. And, you know, that was like the last stop. You know, if you didn't get whatever you needed there, you were out on your own. You better figure out how to do it, make it, source it, whatever it was. But one of my favorite things to do when I was a kid, he would stop at the Piggly Wiggly, and they had this huge display of hoop cheese, and like to a kid that was like being in heaven. So I thought today, in honor of my grandfather, I would bring some hoop cheese with me. I love hoop cheese. He would always give us or give me saltine crackers to go along with it. So I brought some saltine crackers to go with it. Another thing, one of his favorites was Vienna sausages. So I brought a can of Vienna sausages. We always had Texas Pete, mustard, peanuts. One of his favorites was moon pies. Now, I've never been a moon pie fan, but he did have Swiss cake rolls. That was one of his little treats that he used to love. So I don't have Swiss cake rolls or moon pies. I'm not a really big, sugar fan. But another thing that I did bring, and I thought about this, I haven't thought about it in forever. One of the ways that he used to make me practice my knife skills is we would sit down and we would have this contest with my pocket knife to see who could peel the apple without cutting it. As it went all the way around, you couldn't break the spiral. And so I haven't done that since I was like a little kid. And I thought, that would be a good exercise just to remember the things that I did when I was a kid with him. Because I really owe so much to him. He really is the guy that laid the foundation for me. I grew up on the Chattahoochee, which now, if you go to Marietta, it's like a thriving suburb. It is nothing like when I was a child. We'd ride our bikes down to the trail, make a fort, and kids just don't have that today, or at least the majority of them don't. And so I'm really just grateful to have grown up along the Chattahoochee, and then also to have a tree farm down in Jackson that we could go to all the time. There's always work to do at a tree farm. If you're not working the farm, you're managing the wildlife that's out there, and the resources that are there. There's always work to do. But I thought it would be fun to just go down memory lane with my grandfather and live in an attitude of gratitude. So let's do it. So my favorite pocket knife is actually my Opinel, but I thought, since we're going back in time, I thought I would bring my Huntsman model Swiss Army knife, because that's what I had when I was a kid. So I went ahead and brought it with me, dropped my apple. It's got bacteria on it now. Gotta peel it. So let's see if I can still peel an apple like I could when I was a kid. I know Pop's watching right now. So here we go. It's always good to practice your skills, right? If you don't use it, you're gonna lose it. Wow, this is a lot easier than when I was a kid, I can tell you that. When I was a kid, I guess I'd get nervous around him. He was so good at this. He had a Puma folding knife, and man, he was like deadly accurate with that thing. And actually, I haven't used my Swiss Army knife in years. It's been a long time. So it'd be good to practice with this thing. You should always be practicing with different types of tools. If you get too comfortable, you'll lose that skill. So far, so good. Haven't broke it yet. Working on it. Precision peeling. And one thing about my grandfather, he was a frogman, World War II. I never knew if I did something right, but I definitely knew if I did it wrong. But I'm pretty sure the Pop's proud of me now. I don't know, somewhere he's still yelling at me, I'm sure. There we have it. At the bottom of the apple now. Boom. There you have it. Peeled all the way. Looks like I still got the skill. Thanks, Pop. Love you. Now we can eat it just like he used to. Finally. Good Good times. People are just so wasteful. Who, me? Oh yeah. Good old Vienna sausages. These things are good for you. Make you a sexual tyrannosaurus. Just like me. What's that from? Go ahead and post it in the comments. Now, in a survival situation, you would want to drink the broth out of this. Practice what you preach, right? Yeah. Cheers. A little taste of home. Good stuff. Just some crackers. Texas Pete. Here's really what matters though. The hoop cheese. You can save that wax too. It's actually pretty valuable. So we'll take our Swiss Army knife here. Cut us a nice little chunk off. Oh yeah. Just like being a kid again. Man. It's the simple things in life, you know. Who'd have thought? I think sometimes we get so caught up in, you know, you got to have Mountain House, right? Or you got to have MREs, or you got to have dehydrated food, or you got to have whatever it is. You know, it's got to be healthy. It's got to be this. It's got to be that. Man, you can stress yourself out. This right here, this meal right here, it's not good for you. It's not at all. But you know what? It's good for my soul. And I think that that's saying a lot. Good for the soul. Now, one thing about water, if you're going to source the water when you're out, make sure you take the proper precautions. I know that there's a lot of game around here, deer, rabbit, turkey, and there's even cows out here, and you don't want to get any of that giardia and cryptosporidium, and there's heavy metals and chemicals, and oh god, it just goes on and on and on. So make sure that you thoroughly read the instructions on your filters or your Aquamirror tablets or whatever type of filtration and purification methods you choose. Make sure that you follow them to a T. And remember that, you know, it's always safest to go ahead and boil the water. Cheers. So, you know, it goes without saying that, you know, after you're done taking a break and everything, make sure you pack out whatever you pack in. That should go without saying. I always carry like a small garbage bag, like one of those plastic bags from the gas station or from the grocery store or whatever, just to put my stuff in. And a word about these cans. I've actually used them before in the past to catch rainwater, maybe off of my tarp, to keep myself hydrated when I'm hunting or stalking. And there have been times, unfortunately, I hate to tell you, but yeah, I've lost stuff. I've lost my canteen before. You just set it down. It happens, right? But I had my trash with me, and I was able to boil some water in one of these cans one time. So, make sure you pack out what you pack in, and you never know, you might have a use for your trash. So, before you leave that spot where you're taking a break, make sure that you look all around, make sure you didn't drop anything. That's really important. So I think we've had a good enough break. We've hydrated up, we've gotten a little snack, we've done a little soul searching, if you will, and try to go back to a happy spot from when I was a kid. So it's time to get back out on the trail. Let's do it. Remember when I was talking about trash? Check this out. Now tell me you couldn't use that for something. Wow, it's amazing. Now here's another example of some trash that you could use. One man's trash is another man's treasure. If you check this out, there is this old can that was laying on the ground. And a lot of people would think, well, man, it's just old trash. But the truth is, you could use that as a cooking stand, a way to contain your fire. We've got that Swiss Army knife. It's got an awl on it. It'd be really easy to make a cooking stand out of. So don't discard trash when you see it out in the woods. It could actually help you out. Now, something else that I'm always looking for, talking about being resourceful, is you need to be thinking about shelter constantly. Obviously, your clothes are your first line of defense, but depending on where you're at, you might have different types of storm systems that come through. Where we're at, it's tornadoes. So I'm always looking for a spot to go in case a tornado does come. It's not the season right now, but you'll notice right behind me, we've got where a tree fell over, and that would be a great spot to take shelter right there. Sure, there's going to be water in the bottom of it, but if you are adequately prepared, you should have something to sit on, and you should also be able to put something over you as well. It'd be real easy to build a shelter right here too, as long as you had the tools to do it. I always carry some type of saw with me. Today I've got a Baco Laplander in my pocket. I really like that just for a pocket saw. They're nice and ergonomic. I don't have to worry about pulling stuff out of my pockets when I go in and out with it. It locks in both the open and the closed position. And don't get me wrong, I love my silky saws. I've got a Gomboy 270. That's an awesome saw. I've got a Boreal 21 by Agua Canyon. Those are great saws. But when I'm out on just a hike like I am today, I love to just throw my Baco into my pocket. It's a great companion saw, and you can actually do a lot of work with it. And if you're a hunter, it also saws bone. So good tip for you there. Now, I don't know if you can appreciate that, but that is a huge beech tree that just fell. The forest that we're in right here, there's a lot of white oak and a poplar and a ton of beech. So this beech tree that's behind me, that's another perfect example of what can happen with beech trees. This one, I'm sure when it hit the ground, it shook the ground. Now, speaking of trash, we seem to have come to an area that has a lot of it. But right here, I found a score because it's some glass, and you'll notice how thick it is. We can make an excellent arrowhead out of this. Check it out. And it also happens to be standing on top of a stump. So for batoning firewood, having a little table to eat on, hey man, doesn't get any better than that. It's not cheating if you find that resource out in the woods and somebody's left it there for you. So I just wanted to stop to talk to y'all a little bit about some of the things that we run into when we're in the field. I'm on a special operations SAR team, and the number one thing that we hear out there is, I never thought it would happen to me. And me and my partner at SARcraft, we realized that if people just had a little bit of training, they wouldn't find themselves in the situations that they do find themselves in. What would be an emergency to them is not an emergency to someone who is prepared. And for example, right now, I've been filming with my phone. I decided I was just going to go ultra simple, left the Nikon at home and all the fancy stuff, just to go out and have a good time today, hang out with y'all a little bit. And a little word of advice about your phone. A lot of people depend on it way too much. They go out there and they upload these maps onto their phone, for example. They use GPS apps, or they rely on accessing the internet. Okay, if you're using your phone intensively, like I have been today. So if you've been, using your phone intensively, like I have been today, you've got to be careful about your battery life. A lot of times, hikers, they go out, or runners, and they're following these maps on their phone, and guess what? That's eating up your battery. And then when they find that the app wasn't as good as they thought it was, and they find that they are way off of trail, and then they start panicking, and they're going around everywhere in the woods, running around like a chicken with their head cut off, and eventually, once they get to the point where they realize, oh no, I'm lost, I need to call for help, they call 911 right before the battery dies, and then we lose contact with them. Now, we can ping the last location, but most of the time people don't stay where they're at, they just keep on going. And we just had one here recently where a guy, he loaded some maps onto his phone, same exact situation. He called 911 at the very end of his battery life, and he just couldn't sit still. And by the time we got to him, it was a nice day, but that night it got really cold, and all he had on was his running shorts and his shirt. And he had dug out a small hole, a pit, and had buried himself in leaves, but he was so tired from his little adventure that day that even when he could hear us, he couldn't yell out for us. And to make things worse, he was in an area that was rich with feral hogs, and so the hogs came and started rooting around him and scared him half to death. It was a crazy night for that guy, I'm sure. But if you're going to go off in the woods, make sure you're responsible. If you're going to carry your phone, what I do is I carry an extra battery pack in my backpack with me, and I knew that I was going to be filming today, and we're about 4 hours out right now. We've been going for about 4 hours. We took about a 20-minute break, but I've been filming a lot with it. My battery's starting to die. I'm going to turn around and start heading back to the house, but I wanted to remind y'all that if you're going to go out in the woods and you're going to take your phone with you, make sure you take an extra battery source with you, just in case something happens. People get lost all the time. If they didn't, there wouldn't be search and rescue teams like ours. So make sure that you think about this type of stuff when you're out in the woods, guys. So even though we haven't sourced the birch or the maple that we were looking for today, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be resourceful, right? Like we found the down beech limbs earlier. We found the glass. We found the can that was left in the woods. Other people's trash you can still use. Something else you want to look out for, though, are game trails. I've noticed there's a lot of deer tracks here. It's not a good time of the day for me to show them to you because the sun's just above us now. It's about lunchtime. But you can see right here on this tree, there's an old rub. And even though it's not deer season, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be aware of where the deer are moving. This is an old rub, but I know that this is a known path for deer. And they've been out here browsing on some of this new growth. We're kind of like having an early spring here, but it just dropped down wicked cold again this week. But you should always be aware of what the game is doing in your area. So if you're a hunter, or if you're practicing your survival skills, your self-reliance, you need to be aware of stuff like that. This is right near a good water source, and there's a lot of white oak here. And obviously deer love the acorns from white oak, and white oak is also another good source for you for medicinal purposes. And the acorns from white oak are actually really good. There's plenty of videos out there on how to make breads like the Indians used to do. You can watch how to get the tannins out of them so it tastes a little better to you. But if it's a source of food for you, it might be a source of food for something else, like for example deer. So something to be aware of when you're out here in the woods. On the way home, I couldn't help but pass back down to this beech tree that fell over. Just look at this thing, and the root system really. This shows you what kind of roots a beech tree has. Check this out. Now that is just a massive tree, and it doesn't have a taproot like, say, pine has or anything. And man, that looks like a very well established tree, but oh my god, dangerous as all get out. Wow. Bad. Holy cow. So I'm back to the spot where I'm going to head back up the hill. It's actually a really massive hill. I've had a really good morning. I hope you've learned something on our little journey through the woods back behind the house. I hope that you've learned a little bit about gratitude and about being happy with what you've got. I think you'll find that if you can find peace and happiness in the things that you have, that the universe will bring you the things that you want, the desires of your heart. I could have let this day just totally wreck it, but I decided not to. So I got to come out here and hang out with y'all. I had a great time. Hopefully you got some good advice on what to do when you go out in the woods next time. So thanks for tuning in. If you like it, like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good one. Hills suck. Wild onions.
Yep. Can't mistake it. Great for soups and stews, seasoning stuff out here. And in this case, getting more energy to get up this damn hill.